That was your way of summoning people?
That's my summons.
That was very depressing.
Well, that's why I changed the key. And no, I don't do recitals. I stopped performing in high school. And there's a reason. So, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Let's try that again. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm ready to go. You can. No, I'll just kind of wing it for 2 more minutes. Yeah, go ahead and start. My name is Connie Taylor. It is my honor and privilege to serve alongside Janet Milkovich. We are the co-presidents of the League of Women Voters of Johnson County. We hope you grabbed a snack and a beverage to get you started this morning, and thank you for all the donations for the food pantry here at Smooch. We are very thankful for your generosity. And we are thrilled to have you here with us. The League is a grassroots nonprofit organization. We are nonpartisan, meaning we do not endorse nor oppose political candidates or parties. We view our work through a DEI lens. For 71 years, LWV JOCO remains committed to our position statements and to our mission to defend democracy and empower voters. We continue our efforts to engage and educate voters on vital issues through programs like these. We encourage you to use the information you gained today and guide the way you advocate and vote. This morning's program, What's on Your Ballot? Vote Local, is all about local elections. There is an election this year. In Johnson County, we're voting on local candidates who will represent us in local municipal government, local school boards, local community college trustees, and our local water resources at Water One. Local. For our friends and neighbors in Wyandotte County, local elections there are very similar. Wyandotte County residents will be voted on local unified government offices, their local register of deeds, their local BPU, which is the Board of Public Utilities, their local school board, local community college trustee, and local municipal government in Bonner Springs and Edwardsville. Vote local. So let's talk about your voting plan for this election. By show of hands, how many of you are planning to vote early in person? Excellent. So if you remember receiving this nice little brochure from the Johnson County Election Office, they have listed those locations. Wyandotte County has 5 early voting locations. Johnson County has 10 early voting locations. Okay, by show of hands, how many of you are planning to vote by mail with an advance mail ballot? Woohoo. All right. That is fabulous. And again, the nice little thing from Johnson County has it primarily filled out. I think all you have to do is fill in a couple places, like your signature and driver's license, and don't forget to fill in your contact information in case there's something wrong with your ballot. And please be sure to mail in your ballot in plenty of time for it to be received at the election office. It needs to be postmarked by Election Day and received in the election office by that Friday, or drop it off in a location near you. So Wyandotte County has 3 drop-off locations. Johnson County has 8 drop-off locations. Okay, final question. How many of you, by show of hands, are planning to vote on Election Day? All right, excellent. I was going to ask you how many of you are going to vote, but I think I've covered the room. So be sure to check out our website at www.lwvjoco.org for information on voting locations, times, and other voting requirements. You'll go to Voting and Elections, then Voter Information, and we have links to both Wyandotte County and Johnson County election offices. Also, be sure to visit vote411.org to see a list of candidates on your ballot, as well as their stances on issues they'll likely face in their elected roles. I've heard this phrase, voting is a right, and it's also a privilege. It's our duty to vote and make our voices heard at the ballot box. Our goal is to give you the foundation to discuss local elections and the importance of Vote Local to spark an interest for deeper conversations going forward. So our plan today begins with our panel discussion. After the presentation, we'll take questions from you. And please write your questions on the white pieces of paper that you found on your chair and lift it high. We'll collect those and bring it to our lovely moderator. We'll conclude our morning with our monthly DEI moment, followed by league announcements. We have a terrific panel this morning. They're ready to share a wealth of information about local issues facing local city governments and local school boards, as well as encouraging our friends, family, and neighbors to vote local. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Janet Milkovich, our co-president, who will serve as our moderator for this morning. Janet, please introduce our guests.
Thank you all. Thank you. So, for the local election for our August primary, how many people showed up to vote in Johnson County? Do you know the numbers, Kathy? Oh, sorry, you raise your hand, you get called on. Anybody know in general, Jen?
It was a little bit over, very small, 10% of our the voters who were able to vote in that primary.
Right.
So it was about 140,000, I think, that were able to vote, and 10% of them showed up.
So 10%, which means 90% of residents from those areas that had a primary did not vote. You have something to add, Marie?
Over 7% of Wyandotte County of those who could have voted did.
So the confusion in my neighborhood, people kept calling and saying, well, we didn't have a primary, so do we have a November election? Have you heard that? So we've talked amongst our speakers, there's kind of a feeling of apathy when it comes to local elections. Sometimes we just take it for granted that the people that have always served us are going to continue to serve us. And sometimes we just think, well, it's not as important as the presidential election. So our goal today is to convince you, if you need convincing, that the people sitting before us are key to the standards of our lives on a daily basis. So now I'd like to introduce our panelists. Paul Lyons, was kind enough to step in for Mayor Kirk Skoog today. Mayor Skoog has a family, and his son is running in the Chicago Marathon, and he felt like he wanted to be there for them. So Paul will do very well. As we learn about the importance of city council elections, we're learning from the best, because Paul has served on the OP City Council since 2007, and he served 2 terms as president. He's also on, if you know what FIAD means, the Finance, Administration, Economic, and Development Committee. I love that word, FIAD. Makes me feel so smart to say it. As well as chair of the Public Works Committee. So please welcome Paul. Our next speaker is April Boyd Norona, as in Corona, so Norona. And she doesn't drink, by the way. We just use that as a little way to say her name, right? April has more than 20 years of experience in academia advanced technologies, and as an author, global keynote speaker, thought advisor, leader on emerging trends. She was elected to the Shawnee Mission School Board in 2022 and is currently serving a 4-year term. April is the first ever Black member of the school board and is committed to more diverse representation in a district that is diverse. Go figure, right? So please welcome April. And last but not least, my friend Lindsay Ford. Lindsay is the executive director of the Voter Network. Before working with the Voter Network, she worked mostly on political campaigns, statewide, local, and federal, and she discovered that candidates and campaigns direct most of their resources at people who are regular voters. So when you have limited money, it's hard to justify spending on someone who might not even go to the polls. This is Lindsay's quote. But then we've created a really crappy loop where non-voters need the information most. So Lindsay got involved with the Voter to Voter project to try to solve this loop and get everyone to the poll. Today, Lindsay is going to convince each one of us to use Voter to Voter, and there's more information in the back. Please welcome Lindsay. So before we begin, would each of you just share what drew you into public service work? Sure.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I really appreciate the League of Women Voters. You do a very important work in our community to encourage people to vote. I just saw a story in the Kansas City Star today about the Johnson County Election Office getting beat up because they distributed the advanced voting request to all registered voters, and somehow that's heresy. So it's organizations like yours that can push back against it. Can you hear me? Is everybody able to hear me? Anyway, I got involved in running for office as Overland Park has an organization where they organize neighborhoods in the city, primarily neighborhoods that are not homes associations. And my wife and I got involved in that, and that's how I got to know who my city council people were and the city staff, and we ended up getting some new sidewalks in our neighborhood. We ended up getting some new street lights. So I enjoyed working with the city and working with people to make that happen. I ended up going to an event with one of my city council people, and I won't name that person, but I asked just a simple question about, how do you like working on the city council? And this was just at the transition when Ed Eilert retired from the city council mayor, and Carl Gerlach became mayor. And the response that I got from my representative was, gee, it's a lot harder now because with Carl, I can't tell what his position is on issues. And before, all I had to do was just go along with whatever Ed Eilert wanted. And I thought to me, well, that is not the kind of representative I want. So I decided to run for office when the deadline was coming up for registering to run for office, and that person didn't have an opponent. So I said, I'm going to run. So I got lucky, I won, and it's been a very rewarding experience ever since.
Good morning. My name is April Boyd Nerona. Shawnee Mission School District, West District is the one that I govern. Before I put my hat in the ring, I asked myself this one question. Did I even know who my school board members were when I was in school? And I didn't, right? Most of us probably don't or didn't. And so one of my main personal goals is to make sure that the kids know, especially those in my district, who is your board member? So I love going into the classrooms. I love posting pictures of me, whatever I'm doing while I'm at particular schools, because that helps put a face with the name. And especially with the older, when I go to Shawnee Mission West High School and meet with some of the high schoolers, because they're our future voters really soon, I let them know, who do you think votes or decides on the funding for the seats you're sitting in, the food you're getting, and things of that sort. And I'm like, I'm a part of that process. You want to be my BFF, right? You want to be my best friend. And so I try and make it really real to them, because when I was their age, I didn't even know who my Board of Education person was, a representative, but it matters.
Let me, for the record, say that my official bio doesn't have the word crappy in it. I'm not sure where Janet pulled that, but if someone could tell my mother, I did not put it in there. I do talk about that crappy loop, though, and I just want to, I really like April's story about talking to students for a lot of reasons, but real quick, a quiz. How many 18 to 24-year-olds do you all think are voting regularly in Kansas in a local election when school board members are on the ballot? Someone's got to yell out a number. 10%. I heard a 10%. I heard a 0%. It's about 3. It's about 3% are voting in local elections. Interestingly, do you know how many 18 to 24-year-olds voted last August when we had that constitutional amendment on the ballot? 30%. It was 41%. Isn't that stunning? Very cool. But I commend April because candidates running for school board may not be talking to 18-year-olds, right? If you don't think they're going to vote, you may not be talking to them. And so I want to thank you for doing that. I was working for, I'll tell you this story. Janet asked me how I got involved, but I was working for the mayor of Kansas City, Kansas, a couple of mayors ago, and served in the office and then helped with the re-election campaign. This was when Mayor Holland was up there. Some of you know Mark Holland. And I signed up my neighbors to vote by mail. They knew how important it was to me. I found out later that none of them voted. They were all in their mid-30s, very smart, working at KU Med, some of them teachers, really engaged. And I realized later that all 4 of them had not voted in the presidential election even. And so really smart and engaged people that knew that election was important to me, but had just, to Janet's point, or maybe Connie, I think Connie said it earlier, folks assume that other people have it handled, right? Especially at the local election level. I also saw coming out of that campaign that the neighborhoods in Northeast KCK, mostly black and brown neighborhoods, voted at about 18%. And mostly white neighborhoods in western Wyandotte County around Piper had voted about 55%. And while I knew those disparities were real, seeing them after coming off an election loss really hit me. And I started thinking about how we had spent our money on the campaign and who we were talking to. And that's that crappy loop. I mean, people who are running for office, and it's not their fault, it's just the system, their goal is to win, and I don't fault them that, but that means you end up talking to people who are already engaged, and then we never talk to the people who aren't. And so I decided that I wanted to work in a different space to really think about how we close that gap.
Great, thank you so much. So our first question, what are 3 important issues that city councils and school boards deal with on an ongoing basis?
Well, for the city council, probably the 3 most important issues we deal with, of course, is our budget. Every year we have to build a budget and determine how we're going to fund that budget and decide on those types of things. That's probably our most important function we perform as a city council representative, is to fund our operation of our government. Another big issue that always comes up in local, and at least in Overland Park, and I'm sure other cities around the area, is land use issues. That is, if there is a developer that wants to build something, either whether it's green space or perhaps where in my part of the city, which is already developed, it has to do with redevelopment. So maybe tearing down an existing building and building something new there. Those always tend to be very controversial and very contentious. And to some extent, our hands are tied from a city council perspective because the state law dictates how we have to consider those developments. It's not as straightforward as a lot of people assume, that we can just simply vote against it because we don't like it there. There's a series of criteria that we have to use from a state law perspective to give fair hearing on both sides, so both the developer's perspective and the citizens' perspective. So land use is the second probably biggest thing. The third biggest thing is probably, I would say, our infrastructure. And as our city continues to age, then we have to tend to spend more money on maintaining our infrastructure. And what I mean by infrastructure is the roads are, of course, what everybody sees, but there's also the stormwater system, the bridges, buildings that the city owns, those kinds of things. And those are all things that we have to maintain. And in a lot of cases, it's money that the public in general doesn't quite understand where that money is going and what it's being used for. So those are probably, from my perspective in Overland Park City Council, those are probably the three big issues.
So they're not exactly sexy issues that you're talking about, right? But they're the issues that determine how we're going to get around our cities, right?
I don't know, I think infrastructure is pretty sexy.
Do you?
It can be from a school board perspective when we're building new buildings. We get to go in with the hard hats and in the mud and look at the schools. But, that was a joke. But, because I just had a couple of schools built in my district, so I'm like, yay, much excited. Much like what you said, budgeting, the budget, a lot because, as you mentioned, we're not self-funded, but, you know, we have to make sure that that budget is on par, that it is in compliance with state and government regulations. So budgeting probably be the first one. When I first started, I knew that there would be lots of a learning curve for me to just determine that, you know, what percentage are we self-funding, so to speak, and what percentage are we funded by the government, and how do we mandate that and spend that and reserve that. And Russell Knapp is a mastermind, our CFO, with doing that. So, I mean, multi-million-dollar budget, right? So budgeting. Second, and not necessarily in this order, is staffing. And you see this almost pick a week, where not only just our school district, but across the world, where we're just struggling with post-COVID, people not wanting to come back and people deciding to just retire, switch industries, start a new career. So we, on all levels, from the high school on down, we're dealing with that as well, in addition to even our executive staff retiring, as you talked about aging, aging of people as well, and aging of careers as well. And third, and just certainly not least, is just looking at the entire population of the district, where it's in the classrooms, right? One of the buzz topics was, we're with enrollment, and that's a factor that we can't control, but it is what it is, right? And so it's the retention and attracting students, employees on both ends. So the population as a whole, with our strategic plan where we're going into phase 2, the budget, and then, what was my third? The budget, the people, and the population with the staffing.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add to that, Ms. Lindsay? So what are the foreseeable challenges, and anybody can answer this, but the foreseeable challenges in the future of local government, be it city council or school board or election office or water board? What are we dealing with here?
Okay. I'll go ahead and go. I mean, what I've seen over the time that I've been on the city council is I guess what I'll call a cancer infecting the local government that we've seen at the state and national level. When I first got on the city council, people were pretty respectful of each other. We didn't always agree, but I kind of viewed us as a team in a way that we talk to each other on a regular basis. Of course, the law requires that we can't talk necessarily about particular issues that come before the council, but we can get a feel for everybody's position generally on things. So you get a pretty good idea how people are going to vote on things and understand where they're coming from. That is a lot harder today. it has gotten way more contentious. It has gotten way more disrespectful. I frankly don't understand it. People, some of our newer elected officials have come onto the city council with this attitude that government is corrupt and I'm coming on to fix government. And it's a perception that people have about politicians, about the way government operates, and they think that it's inherently corrupt. And that is not the case at the local level. And so it makes it a lot harder to govern. That's my biggest concern. I'll just leave it at that because I could probably talk all day on that.
I want to give a plug to our observers. I see Eileen out there, but we have a group of observer corps, members of the league, that attend city council meetings, school board meetings, commission meetings, and report back to league members to tell us what's happening. So that's one way that really keeps us in the know. But I've observed, too, differences on both sides of the table when I attend meetings. So, April, what would you say about that?
We were talking earlier about the evolution, I guess we'll call it that. And so I've only been in 2 years in comparison to your multiple years. And I'm midway of my first term of 4 years. And so when I came in, it was seriously contentious. And I'm not going to go there because we don't want to have any flashbacks about that time. But I am proud to say when you hear Shawnee Mission School District Board of Education, you don't have to, oh my gosh, or there are no rolling of eyes. I'm really proud to say that we are a team. And the way that our board, our 7-member board runs is that we have 2 voting sessions, I guess, where 4 of us run at a time, and then 3 of us run at a time. Both, I don't know what you call it, voting sessions rather, have 1 at-large seat. So I was on the end where we had the 3-year term, the 3 candidates running, and so now we're at where we have our 4 candidates running with 1 at-large. 2 incumbents are running, and then 2 are open seats. So it's going to be pretty interesting. But I remember when I first started running, or right after I announced, people were like, oh, wow. And you had to be careful not to feed into that rhetoric because both of my parents are lifelong retired educators. Education is what I know. I've taught from a paraprofessional perspective from K to 12, and I've been a college professor of cybersecurity. So I've taught the gamut. And I love being in the classroom. But I kind of had this inkling of, how does the other side live, right? And so that was one of the other main reasons why I wanted to serve, which is the key word here that all 3 of us do, serve. And I think if candidates, get the fear or the rhetoric out of their mind and really focus on the serve, you'll be intact. Your mission, your vision, your purpose, if that is at the core, you'll be fine. I mean, because when people ask me, should I or why, at the very core, it's service.
Yeah, and I think it's not just candidates that need to kind of get out of their heads about that. I fear that as our political rhetoric becomes more toxic, then folks who are reasonable and thoughtful stop having conversations with their friends and families and neighbors because we're nervous that it will turn into something combative or something toxic, and so we avoid those conversations, but then we've ceded that space and we've stopped normalizing these conversations. So I worry about that. Yeah.
And as far as the challenges that you both have mentioned, Paul and April, is that universal, do you believe, to all boards of education and councils? That's not just unique to Shawnee Mission or Overland Park, I think we're saying. Is that correct?
School boards universally are run differently. I always like to poll the audiences when I speak about the school board. How much do you all think school board members in Shawnee Mission get paid? I make sure people understand that. When I say serve, I mean serve. serve, right? How many people know in the audience, this is a good audience, you already know, but I always like to poll them that, how many people in the school district am I directly, keyword, responsible for? We got over 30,000 employees, 26,000 students. How many people? I am responsible as a school board member to hire and or fire the superintendent. That is my only employee. So if there's a teacher at your school and you don't like them, that's not my job directly to get them out of there. I've had, candidates, I've heard them, I'm gonna, like what you mentioned, clean it up. That's not primarily our job. I'm responsible for one employee and to help her govern the district. And a lot of people don't understand that. So I'm not trying to clean up the schools or, that's not my agenda. That's not any school board member's agenda. And so there are a lot of little things like that where, when people get in there to run for this or that, do you actually know what you're being elected to do? Because some of the things you think you can do, you're not really directly responsible for.
Where can we apply that to a lot of other places? Did you have something to add?
Well, I was just going to, real quick, answer your question directly, I think it's a common problem across, as I talk to other elected officials on other city councils in the metro area, they deal with the same issues that we're dealing with. And it's flowed down from the national and state legislatures and elected officials that attitude, that problem has started to infect the local governments. Now, I talk about Overland Park. I think we've been fortunate that over the years we haven't had that contentious issue as much as some other. I do know that some other cities around us have had that problem for quite a while, but it's new to Overland Park.
Thank you. Connie's reminding me, you have notes, paper on your seats. So if you have questions, please feel free to write them and somebody will bring them up to us to answer. Jen will collect them. Thank you. So Lindsay, the Voter Network has a great slogan. I hope this slogan is still true. But friends don't let friends skip elections. Don't you love that? So we know that some elections are won or lost by what, less than 100 votes?
Well, we saw in Wyandotte County in the primary, there was a coin toss. You see that? There was
No.
a tie, and they flipped a coin to decide who would get out of the primary.
So tell us about relational organizing and how does that get people to the polls?
Sure. I saw a really interesting study a few years ago that most of us, when thinking about our friends' political behavior, we can guess often where they kind of fall on the political spectrum. But we're pretty bad at guessing how often they participate and how often they vote. And we assume our friends and networks vote the same way we do or vote as often as we do, and we are usually wrong. So I'll put that out there because I think everyone in this room votes when they can. But that 10% that voted in the primary that we talked about, those are the same 10% that come out every time. And that's not a lot of people to be giving a lot of power to. So at the Voter Network, our goal is to empower individuals and organizations to be talking to their friends and neighbors and family members about the act of voting and the process of voting, and we're trying to make that easier for folks, but we also have built some programming around it so that we can measure and track what we're doing, and I think help keep folks accountable. So we built a really cool online tool called Voter to Voter. How many of you are Voter to Voter ambassadors or have signed up before? Yeah. Raquel in the front row is our new League of Women Voters team leader. But we show you in the tool, you can look up your friends and you can see who is a regular voter and who is not, which is kind of alarming for folks who are new and don't realize that your voting history is public, right? Not who you vote for, just whether or not you vote. But you get in there and we give everybody a score. It's just a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then we're asking folks like, those friends that are in your network that are zeros and ones and twos aren't voting in local elections, and they need a little bit more help. And it's got to be a little bit more than an email or a Facebook post. You actually need to call and follow up with them and make sure they get it done, because we're not in the business of changing hearts and minds. We're in the business of changing behavior. And the behavioral science, and you all know this, if you're thinking you want to go to the gym more often, having a friend go with you is going to make it a lot more likely that you'll do it. So if we are recruiting volunteers, asking them to find 10 or 15 of their friends and make sure they go vote. It's essentially a pyramid scheme, but the goal is a stronger democracy, right?
How do you even begin a conversation with a neighbor or a coworker that you don't know very well about voting?
Raquel and I were just talking about this. We have all sorts of tips and tricks on our website and in our toolkit, but the nice thing about this project in particular is that we're just talking to people about the act of voting. And so we say, just start with a text message that's like, oh, hey, I signed up for the League of Women Voters team, and I have to get 10 people to vote, and you're going to be one of my 10. And did you know that there's this website, Vote 411, where you can see who's on your ballot? And I promise you, we've polled all of our ambassadors, and I very, very rarely hear, I think I've heard once, maybe someone said that the person they texted was like kind of annoyed. But for the most part, everyone's gonna thank you just for the information, right? If we know that 80% of folks aren't gonna vote in November, getting a reminder from you is pretty easy. But also don't talk to people you don't want to. If you don't want to call to vote, don't talk to them about it.
If you all walk out the door without saying goodbye, I'm going to feel kind of sensitive today. But to that point, sometimes people will say, I'm not political. So is that a shutdown, or is there a way to overcome that objection? How do you all do it when you run for office?
There's two different aspects to it, right? They say they're not political. That could mean two things. They're not partisan, or they're not really tied into what's been going on at the local level or at the government level. And what I always try to do is explain to people that what we do is don't consider it political, right? When you're voting on fixing a street or something, to me, that's not political. It's practical, right? You got to maintain your. So that's probably the conversation I try to have with people when they don't really want to engage. And I said, but it's really important. You have a street out in front of your house. You should be interested in how that street gets maintained. And so that's kind of how I try to overcome it.
And just like Paul said, one thing that works for me is I make it personal. When I was campaigning, and so I brought my little door hanger, and it's like, this is the sexy part, right? But then you have to build that relationship, right? And all of us are talking about that communication factor. So a lot of times I started with, I remember the first time when I was younger and I voted, or I remember when I was younger and I would go into the booth, thank you, and vote with my mother, because she took me every time, and we had the pegs, and but she took me every time, and I remember those times, and I remember the first time I voted and who was on the ballot, and I was like, I did it, and I remember the first time, because I have a 25 and 21-year-old daughter, the first time I voted with them, and then I have an 18-year-old, and I'll remember the first time I voted with, so I really make it a story and make it very personal, to kind of trigger that heartstring, that emotional connection to, it's our right and our privilege. It really is for everyone.
The League's been doing candidate forums at libraries and others, and last Saturday at Blue Valley, we had an opportunity for people coming to the library to meet school board candidates. And it's amazing how many people say, well, my kids aren't in school anymore. So they have no skin in the game. And I'm wondering if they know how it could change the community if the wrong people get elected. So I think whatever our age, whatever the age of our children, or we have no children, communicating the importance of these elections. And what were you going to say?
You know, those friends I told you about in Wyandotte County who didn't vote in the mayoral election, Lisa, I'll just name her. You can tell her I talked about her if you want to. Lisa is a woman who will tell me all the time, like, I'm not political, I don't do this, I'm not a voter. And what I would love it if she would find her own why. You know, that's my goal ultimately, and I've been working on that, like chipping at that over time. But my strategy with Lisa is, you know what, I need you to do this because I have to get these 10 voters, and if you don't vote, then it shows up negatively on my scorecard here, and then I'll lose to the League of Women Voters team. And so then Lisa is just accountable to me, and in fact, you know, just the act of doing it, she becomes invested in a way. You know, it's kind of like when I play fantasy football, then I actually I'll start watching football because I'm invested, because I want to win. And so I think sometimes just getting people over the hump and helping them cast the ballot, then they become invested in a way that they maybe didn't think they were going to.
And it really isn't that once you take that first step and you start sharing information with people, they start feeling better about themselves. They start feeling a reason for why their vote's going to matter because they understand what they're voting for. And I think that's kind of a bottom line to voter.
Yeah, I think people don't like to do things that make them feel stupid, right? And local elections are kind of tricky. It's hard to find out who's on the ballot and what they stand for and whether they're the right person to fill the pothole or, and so I think, you know, I do this for a living. I get ballots still, and I'm like, gosh, do I know all those community college members? They're like, and so just I think helping pull the shame out of the process too can be really helpful.
I just wanted, because of the comment that was made, I just wanted to say one thing. One of the things I learned in my time on the city council is, you know, Overland Park we've been pretty lucky in being viewed very positively in terms of being a great city to live in and so forth. Well, the reason for that is because of the very first thing, when I talk to businesses that are potentially going to come to Overland Park, first thing they want to know about is the school district. Great schools make great cities. And so those that don't have kids in school anymore, I don't have my kids aren't in school anymore, they need to understand that that's a foundation for what makes the city a great city. You have to have a great school district. So.
Thank you. So both city council and school board races are intended to be nonpartisan, but there's been talk about candidates naming their party affiliation. Last year, somebody actually put their party affiliation on their campaign signs. For the three of you, I'd like to know, what's your opinion of that?
If I could, because this is a passionate subject for me. I consider myself fanatically nonpartisan, and I've always told people that. During the 16 years that I've been on the council, though, I've seen the pendulum swing from one side to the other. When I first ran for office in 2007, it was just a few years after Johnson County voted to make local elections nonpartisan. So interestingly, when I ran in 2007, there was still a lot of focus from the Republican Party side to push candidates as Republicans. And I happen to be a registered Democrat, so I was worried about how that was going to work out, and I was pushing against the Republican machine. Over the years, it's now swung to where it's gotten far more partisan, I think, on the Democratic side. That there's now this push from the Democratic side to emphasize their candidates as Democrats versus nonpartisan. And I'm sorry to say, I really am worried that because of that, and it's both parties that are involved here, I'm not very optimistic that we're going to continue to maintain nonpartisan elections at the local level. I think just the actions that both parties are taking and I met with a candidate who was running for my seat, and this person was emphasizing to me that he was qualified because he was a Democrat and I was a Democrat. That is not, and I told him, I said, that is not what I look for in terms of who the best candidate is. We have to get away from that. I urge both political parties to stop trying to push these elections as partisan elections, because it's inevitable that the state legislature is going to force us to make these partisan. And I think it can even be worse this time, in that previously, although there might have been Democrats and Republicans on the city council, they still kind of worked together and realized that most issues they dealt with were issues that were not related to partisanship. I see it going towards having these factions of council members supporting a particular platform that their party is pushing. And that is not where we want to go.
And I agree, it's not where we want to go, but I remind myself at all times that I benefit from a team of board members that really understand it is not partisan. It is, does this child need to have what they need to have in order to graduate? Regardless, right? And so we get that. So I understand that I am privileged to be on a board that gets it and continues to get it, right? But I do agree with you. It does not need to be partisan. And you know, when I was running, the only time that was very prevalent was when I was knocking on the doors, and I cringed when people would ask me because I knew the context that they were asking me. But sometimes it did work in my favor. Other times not. But you know, when it's one-on-one, then you can explore it a little bit more, because it will determine, you know, whether that person will or won't vote for you. It is what it is. But that is really when it was most prevalent in my 2 years so far. Doesn't come up at our board meetings, is not a factor when we're voting on, or not voting on, but determining how to govern the budget and things of that sort. We get it. Every candidate gets a kit, and you know what the laws and the rules and the protocols are. We know already how we are to regulate ourselves when we're running or serving.
Why is that important?
It can sway a vote. It can, depending on how that potential voter feels or which way the rhetoric is slanting. But it does not, we both are on the same page. I do not think it needs to be at the forefront of, because it can determine a way a voter votes. It can determine the way the rhetoric and that particular time frame and how the machine operates. It just does.
I've observed on some city councils that the parties split. They're already elected, but the parties split, and all of a sudden there are multiple agendas. And that can't be good for the city, right? So I think that's kind of one of the points we're making. So everyone in this room has a sphere of influence. How do we exercise that influence to get people to the polls? So Lindsay shared something, so just take a minute. You could talk to the person next to you if you want for a minute or so. Who's within your sphere? We'll give you a couple minutes. This is not a quiet group, so we expect to hear conversation.
You open things up. You open a piece. Are you going to be able to get them quiet?
Yes. We'll give Connie back at the piano. Okay, that's your end of your fun conversation time. Am I going to have to ask Connie to play the piano again? Thank you. Is there anybody in the room that doesn't have a sphere of influence? Okay, so how
I
do
was
we?
about to get really sad. I didn't want to, someone raises that I have no sphere of influence.
So, how do we exercise that? Talk a little bit more. It kind of goes back to earlier with the voter to voter. But what tools has this panel given you, this program given you, so that you can exercise or share the knowledge that you're gaining with 10 people that you meet in the next week? Can we give you a challenge to do that? When you leave here today, can you make a list of 10 people? Join in to voter, log those 10 people on your site, and then just make a plan that you're going to share information with them to encourage them to exercise that vote. Does that sound like a good idea? Are you in it? Yeah? Okay.
You know, Janet, the asking friends to vote sounds super simple, and in fact, a lot of people feel like it's not going to be enough, like they're not doing enough. But our voter-to-voter effort, we're now talking to over 40,000 voters statewide, and they're voting, just when we ask our friends to vote, they vote almost 20 or 25% higher, at a higher rate than the average member of the public. And that gap gets even wider when they're unlikely voters, or we call them low propensity voters. So if you're talking to someone who doesn't normally vote in a local election, we're turning them out at a wildly greater rate. So it's super effective. It sounds really easy, but I want you to know that it's working, and we're going to keep doing it as long as it keeps working.
Thank you. All right, here's some questions from you all. The easiest one, concerning the lack of civil discourse in government. Name 2 or 3 ways that can be improved. What can the average person do to lessen the toxic environment?
Wow. I already mentioned this, and then once again, it's psychological, it's emotional, to the fact that I always remind people that this is service. It's not an agenda, because if it was an agenda, I'd be asking to get paid, right? That would be first on my list. And that the root cause is that familiarity with this is accountability. A lot of times when people would ask me, why are you doing it? Somebody has to. Somebody has to. And for a moment, and I'll get a little personal, is that when I ran my campaign, I worried it was going to be, contentious. I worried it was going to be, stealing of signs and just very like, oh my gosh, what did I do? But I did not have that experience. And the more that I did get out to speak with people, the better I felt about myself and the better I felt about my community and won those constituents that did vote for me. Everyone didn't understand that, but I won enough voters to secure my seat in that. So hopefully it won't get more contentious and people will remember the why as to why we're doing this, because it's expensive, right? And it's a lot of time. So we have to be sure about what our core reason is and let others understand that as well. It's not that we want to be on the front page, for the most part, those that do it for the right reason. It's not that we want to be in the limelight and all that. At the core, it's the service. So I think as we remind people of that, it's like, you're really showing your true intentions if it's not that. And people see that.
I mean, I guess I would say we as elected officials need to work harder to convince people that what we're doing is, just as you said, is a service. I call it that we're making decisions that are in the best interest of the city. And we may not agree on what that is. That's okay, because that's part of the process that we go through. But if everybody realizes that there's not a hidden agenda here, all we're trying to do is take in the facts, listen to what people have to say, and try to make a decision that we think is the best decision. If we can all agree that that's what we're trying to do, then I think it could become less contentious, less divisive, and certainly stay away from the personal. Don't take things personally. I mean, people, I always have, I've been yelled at a lot during my years on the city council. I've always tried, anyway, to not take it personally because they're yelling at me because they think that there's something, some agenda that's going on that they're not privy to, and I try to explain that there's not. It's just that we're trying to do our best to make a decision. I don't know whether that helps or not, but that's where I hope we can get people to realize that there's nothing nefarious here. We're trying to do our best as servants of the community.
It took,
And let me add this too, because I keep saying we are a 7-person board. 7 people have to agree with different perspectives, different voices, representing different constituents. So it's not just April, this is what it's going to be, darn it. I got 6 other people that either have to sway my way or, fortunately, as I mentioned, we pretty much are on one accord. I am very, it's a benefit. But it's not just that one person. It's 7. It's 7 people coming to one accord, and the majority will win. But it's not just one person.
it took me a while to realize that when I'd go to city council meetings, the decisions weren't being made at that meeting. They'd been made at FIAD and, all the different other committee meetings that were equally as painful sometimes. Some lasted till 11 o'clock at night, but to really look at all the different perspectives. So the question was, how can we learn to lessen the toxicity? Maybe one is listen, for each of us to listen, whether you agree or not, at least listen and acknowledge that you're hearing. Seems like it helps. Did you have something to add?
I just wanted to name that it's getting harder, right? I mean, the toxic voices are the loudest. The money flows through political parties and candidates, and we don't see a ton of civic infrastructure out there. And so what you all are doing is so commendable, and I would just encourage you to keep it up. We have to take the message of democracy and get passionate about democracy to people where they are. And the league does that really well, right? Like, we're not getting a lot of folks, who are going to come to Saturday morning meetings to talk about local elections, right? And so you all have become ambassadors for that, but we have to build our civic infrastructure and get to people where they are.
Go league, go league. So talk about the terrifying trend of book banning in school districts.
Pass.
Right. Who's going to answer that one?
What's the situation in Shawnee Mission, but across the board? What in the heck is going on? Editorial note.
So, disclaimer, I am here expressing my views, not the views of the school board. Let you understand that. But I will share that this is the process, I guess, from the bottom up. So if a person, mother, grandma, student, has a concern, they are free to email their representative. So West District, that would be me. And from that point, and this is how the Shawnee Mission School Board operates, is that we send those concerns to the superintendent. Remember, that's our only employee. And the superintendent, and we copy our board president, and our superintendent then has her executive board. That's the director of, the main areas, secondary education, HR, student services, what have you. And it, for lack of a better word, it sits there for them to determine it. because the board governs and doesn't assist, the board governs the district via the superintendent. You'll never see us or any of us going to a classroom and grabbing books. Shouldn't, and any board member, not just Shawnee Mission. You'll never see us personally responding to a concern or something that weighs negatively towards the district. That is the role of either the executive board member, the executive committee member that reports to the superintendent, or the superintendent. There is one person that speaks on the school board's behalf, and that is only the president, which is why I had to make that disclaimer. Now, that is how we chose to run our Board of Education. You will hear one unified message from our superintendent in alliance with, from our president of the Board of Education, in alliance with our superintendent, from advice and guidance from her executive committee. So when a concern, a concern is a concern, whether it's the books, whether it's COVID, whether it's the bathrooms, a concern is a concern regarding us. So one is not more inflammatory, a concern is a concern, but that is the channel or chain of command that it comes from. Remember, yes, we do govern locally, but we are also governed by federal and other regulations, state regulations that, with our sports. That, we heavily are governed and regulated with sports from the state standpoint. So there are particular areas that really determine how we operate, but understand our only employee is the superintendent, and so we support and we govern the district, but we support and deal only with the superintendent, and we either support or spread her message or what her decision is from the guidance from her executive cabinet. Does that help?
That's a very detailed information. You had a,
So do you do any recommendation as a board that goes through your president up to the superintendent?
The recommendation comes from her executive committee, or cabinet, her executive cabinet. Who are those that are best versed and knowledgeable about how the state, how the, or other governments, governing regulations govern the school district. So we, depending on how it goes through the level of communication, if it is something that we need to vote on, whether we're going to change what the policy or the standard that's in place now, then it will come before the board. If there is already a standard or policy in place, we may not. If there's a pending change, it will come to us. If it's not, if it's a 4-year ruling or what have you, then it most likely may not come to us in our executive committee meeting that we have before the school board.
I'm going to cut that one off there. Thank you. Do you?
Real quick,
Sure.
I just want to say, just so you're all aware, the local government of Overland Park behaves exactly the same way. We have a city manager. City manager is the only employee of the governing body. The city manager is responsible for executing the policies established by the governing body. But by and large, the city is operated, the day-to-day decisions are made by the city manager and her staff, not the governing body. So it's very similar to what April was just describing for the school board.
Did you notice he said her staff? So the League of Women Voters, for years, we've gone into high schools to help register voters. Since COVID, we've hit some stumbling blocks, but we know that 17 and 18-year-old age group is critical. So what can we do? We know what we can do to encourage students to vote more. We're just having a hard time getting back into the schools. So any suggestions you have to make, we would welcome.
Well, real quick if I could, I just want to make you aware that we do have a a student council program that we have. So students at some of the high schools around Overland Park can join the student city council, and they learn about how our city council operates. They learn about how the city is organized, those kinds of things. So that's one thing that for high school kids, this is primarily for sophomore, junior, senior in high school. It's a good program to get an understanding of how government operates and what it's all about.
Thank you. And this is the last question for Lindsay. Oops.
Oh, I was just going to add, it's even though I'm a board member, I mean, I guess I could walk into any school and I'm a board member, I can. But I find the allies within either organizations, teachers, or staff that are agreeable, right? That want our presence there. Because, of course, when I walk in, they're like, oh, she's here. And I'm like, I am not here. I'm just to support you. So it's always a fine line when we walk into the room. It's like, oh, they're here. But I always try and find the alliances within the school that want me there. Not that no one does it. That came out wrong. Those that are allies, that really appreciate and know that our role is important. Not us, not April, but our roles are important.
Thank you. And Lindsay, we had a question, is the voter network available in Missouri?
The short answer is no. Just to brag on the program a little bit, our Voter to Voter is a pretty simple website. It's got one mission, and that our one mission is to increase voter turnout among people who aren't likely to vote. And it works really well, and so we've been getting some national attention. In fact, I've had 2 calls in the last week with national organizations asking us if we're going to expand out of Kansas. And about every 6 months, I think, gosh, I should put something for Missouri on my website, and then I talk myself out of it. I told someone this last week, and they said, what if you just had a tab on your website that said, for Missouri voters, and when they went there, it just said, move to Kansas. So I've been thinking about that. But no, we're Kansans, we're committed. It's a big state, and we feel like we understand the landscape well and the election laws, and can articulate that. And so to grow, we need staff who are that dedicated and committed to understanding Missouri election rules and regulations. And maybe we'll get there. Maybe someone will give me a lot of money to do that, and I'll let you know.
I personally don't think there's anything stopping you, Lindsay. To see your projected growth over these last years is amazing. So this is going to wrap up this portion of the program. Please thank Lindsay, April, and Paul. And I think they might be around for questions. And I'm going to introduce Jen, our Vice President.
Thank you so much, Janet. Most of you guys know me. I'm Jennifer Day. And I just wanted to say at the outset, I really appreciate that Connie and Janet have come together over the last couple months to help out with these programs and have done a terrific job in pulling them together. I've needed the help just due to some personal things happening in my life. So thank you so much. Yeah, and thank you all for being here. This has been a really informative program on local elections, and that was our main goal. So hopefully, we know that a lot of you are already very involved and knowledgeable, but hopefully we're giving a few extra tools by pulling together fabulous panelists like this, Paul Lyons, April Boyd-Norona, and Lindsay Ford. Thank you so much for being here, and a special thank you to our moderator, Janet Milkovich, today. Thank you, thank you. Also, thank you to Adam Kohler from Smooch, who is helping with technology, sound, and recording today. Yes. A big improvement over our last meeting, so this has been so helpful. Thank you. I just wanted a few takeaways that I learned from today's program right off the top. So scared a bit about that one that you mentioned. Some folks who didn't have a primary in August think they don't have a vote in the general election, and we might need to make sure our neighbors are aware and eliminate that confusion if we can. People are so confused about these odd year elections. Every year we have an election, and every voter is going to have something to vote for. Even if it's an incumbent running unopposed, go and vote for that person, or undervote. Because showing up and undervoting also sends a message to folks. Only 3% of 18 to 24-year-old voters in JOCO are voting in our local municipal elections. That's a big deal. The current political climate is contributing to a general misunderstanding of what our elected officials do. So becoming more educated about that is important, about them and about their specific jobs is very important. And of course, local elections can be tricky, so helping people feel more empowered in their voting process, thanks to things like the Voter Network, with candidate knowledge through Vote 411, and how voting works is a big takeaway today, I think. And the last that I'm pulling out of this, how to lessen toxicity that seems to be building throughout, just in general. One idea is to listen. That's a great start. I have that issue with a sister, just talking about some of the issues. We're able to keep things civil, but being able to calmly hear each other, is a big step. And that's really, people come into it with so much fervor sometimes. So just being able to sit and listen calmly is a good way to start things off. So as Janet mentioned, we had Lindsay Ford talk to us about friend mapping. I think we already kind of did the poll, but we all have 5 to 10 friends, family, or neighbors that we can talk to about voting. And I wonder how many of us will talk to those 5 or 10 friends, family, and neighbors about the importance of voting local as we approach the coming election. Do we have a plan? I've got a plan, yeah? Got an idea in mind? Maybe just jot the names down as a start. It's a good place to start. And now I would like to introduce Kay Healy, who's going to share our DEI moment for us for this month. Thank you so much, Kay.
Thank you. Kay Healy. I'm the current chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And before I do my little deal, I want to just note that the League has information in the back by the Your Vote Matters sign. 2 handouts. One that's why vote in local elections that can give you some helpful tips as you talk to friends and neighbors, and also an information sheet for new voters to Johnson County, which includes a lot of things. Some of you may know October 17th is the deadline to register to vote. At any rate, we are here to acknowledge today that National Hispanic Awareness Month ran from September 15th until October 15th, and that Monday, October 9th, is Indigenous Peoples Day. And that's a day that we celebrate and honor Indigenous peoples and commemorate their histories and cultures. And this is an official city or state holiday in various places, 10 states, but not Kansas. So I'm going to do a land acknowledgement. And this was, I sought out help from the Kansas City Indian Center, which is a social service agency for Indians, Native Americans in our community. The land that surrounds us is part of who we are. It reflects our histories. Native Americans are the traditional guardians of this land. Many, many years ago, the land that surrounds us today was home to the Kaw Nation and the Osage people. The Kaw Nation were called People of the South Wind. The Shawnee people were forced to move to this land in the 1800s. Native American people continue to live in Kansas, sharing talents and culture. We will continue to work to protect and honor the history and people of this land. So please turn to a neighbor, just for 2 minutes, and discuss one way that you can work this next few weeks to protect and honor the history and people of this land. Talk amongst yourselves. Pardon? It's supposed to be done at the beginning of a meeting, but at any rate, this is when we're designated. So. the ending. Okay. They're dominoes. I just learned how to. At any rate. What was that? I don't remember. Oh, the Overland Park, the framework Overland Park. Let's just say. Thank you very much, and I will turn it over to to Jennifer Day. Thank you as we go forth and protect and honor.
Thank you. Thank you, Kay. Sorry. Yeah, what a great idea. That really, food for thought in a lot of ways there. So just want to ask, do we have any new members of the league here with us today? Are we all, if hopefully we'll get more and more of them showing up at these programs as we go forward, but thank you all so much for joining us here today. Did you know that the league membership, speaking of that, would make a fabulous gift to your friends, family, and neighbors? Perhaps those you identified in your friend mapping. Visit our website at www.lwvjoco.org for more information. And speaking of our website, be sure to check out our website help desk that we've got out in the welcome area. There's a little, it's behind the food table that we are gathering donations. So we also have one more postcard party at the Monticello Library in Shawnee next Saturday, October 14th at 9:30 a.m. Help us to encourage those who don't often vote. There's some sample decorations and wording that will be provided, and we have plenty of room for all of you. There's room for 100 people. So please join the fun. Sign up in the book. I think it's in the back here, or visit our website, again, for more information. Back there, Marie's waving her arms, so she's got that. We also have plenty of door knockers for our literature drop in the back of the room as well. Our fabulous voter information team will supply you with a turf and some instructions on going out. There's no need to talk to voters. You just hang it on the door and get on your way. Let's see. Oh, our final candidate meet and greet will be for the Gardner-Edgerton Board of Education. These events people are really enjoying these. The event is from 10 a.m. until 11 a.m. at the Gardner Public Library. I'm not sure what the date is on that. Does anybody know the date off the hand? Sorry. October 28th, so towards the end of the month here. That's great timing. You'll have the opportunity to introduce yourself to local candidates and ask them questions about their stances on local issues impacting local schools. We're also hosting a Zoom meeting for members here on Saturday, October 21st at 9:30 a.m. for an update to the League of Women Voters of Kansas election method study. We're going to hear from Richard Pund, who has been chairing this committee, and will have an opportunity to practice other voting methods. So be sure to register for this important study. Visit our website again for more information at the lwvjoco.org. And our next monthly program meeting will be Saturday, November 4th, beginning at 9 a.m. As you noticed, our 9 a.m. is for kind of a socializing. We settle down and do the nitty-gritty starting at about 9:30. So that's happening here at Smooch. And lastly, we invite you to take a field trip with us. Remember our fabulous program last month on immigration. It was so great. One of our speakers, Joan Kelly, who's from the Jewish Vocational Services, invited us to tour the facility in Kansas City, Missouri. So registration is required for that. Again, that's available on the website. And if anybody has any questions about how to find these, any finding information, that table out in the hall, the welcoming area, is going to be a great place to stop by and find that out. So thank you all so much for sharing your Saturday morning with us. Be sure to vote. Make sure you tell your friends to vote, as usual. And we'll see you all soon. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much.